It's a great honor and privilege to be here. And I think you and me, Lucia, share a common passion, which is how to attract, how to make astronomy community to be more inclusive. And I will demonstrate with reference to the history of astronomy in Africa, something that has not been very much explored, but I'll show you by means of examples of what we have been able to do through through literature research, as well as basic research that I've done. I mean, I've gone out to the field to go and search for this stuff. And really part of what motivated me first is that I grew up in a country in the 1980s where if you were Black and you wanted to be a scientist, opportunities didn't exist, and the system totally discouraged you from doing it. And one way they did it was to take away an image of a Black person from science. So when the history of the subject was presented, the images we saw there, we did not see the images of ourselves. And so at a very young age, one starts asking themselves whether really, is it because African people were never curious about nature and wanted to find out more about nature, or whether there was something else that was at play. By profession, as Lucia has said, I'm an astrophysicist. I did my PhD on numerical modeling of waves on the surface of A stars with magnetic fields. So it was computational, actually, my PhD. And then I went on, also I did observational. I mean, I've worked on telescopes as Lucia experienced when she was in South Africa. But this was an aside project, which was well funded actually by South African government. And I'm gonna be showing you some of the things. So I'll start with simple things that will sound very familiar to you. And then I'll show you with things that probably might surprise you. I mean, people think that the writing culture, the written culture, and mathematics and things like that came to Africa through colonization. But actually, I'll show you that as far as centuries back, Black people, at least in West Africa and those parts of Africa, were very curious and were learning mathematics and even astronomy, what you recognize as astronomy, albeit ancient astronomy at their schools in the Sahara in West Africa. So, I'm not able to, all right, okay. And I've published a couple of, these are very high school children kind of books, again, based on these simple things that I'll be introducing to you. We have written conference proceedings, contribution to book chapters, as well as contributed articles to this huge handbook of archaeoastronomy and ethnoastronomy. So this was really part of my research as well. And also have contributed to 2 documentaries, one of which you might see next week is called Cosmic Africa, where we travel to the different parts of the African continent and studied living cultures and how they relate to stars and things like that. And then that second part is, to me, a very fascinating part, which shows you that, again, that African people, Black people, 400 years ago, 300 years ago, were studying mathematics and astronomy in their schools in the Sahara, as I said. So an example of simple indigenous astronomy, I'm setting a scenario there to show you that societies in Africa, like societies everywhere in the world, back in the days, were organized. I mean, for example, they needed to have first fruit ceremonies. I mean, they celebrated that. How would they have known when to celebrate? Initiation schools, every member of the society has had to go through these initiation schools. When did they know the right time to do it? to prepare the land for plowing. When did they, I mean, so they basically needed a calendar system to be able to run their societies. That is a picture that I'm giving to you there. And my point is that really they were able to do that because they had organized societies and they had a calendar system. For example, we just celebrated New Year in the modern calendar, but where I come from, our New Year was celebrated in September, the 1st of September. So what they used to do, they would observe the Pleiades when it rises in the evening, and then they will know that this is the time to prepare the land, and this is time for the New Year, essentially, to celebrate that. And throughout much of Africa, that's how people were using the Pleiades. And the name for the Pleiades, for example, in my language, it means the digging stars. You know, when people saw these Pleiades, they knew that it was time to start digging the land. And then, as I said, I mean, they even knew the month when to celebrate the first fruit ceremonies and so on. And then the star Canopus, the second brightest star, I think, after Sirius, was used to, when they saw it rising early in the morning, it used to mark the beginning, I mean, the time to start initiation school. So the beginning of winter. And it was called a horn star because whenever the first person to see it rising would blow a horn and they will be rewarded with a cow or something like that. So these were practices just over a century ago. Okay, and then the calendar, the traditional calendar of Southern Africa was really based on observing the moon, the changing phases of the moon. You know, the time it takes for the moon to go around the earth, approximately 29.5 days. If you multiply 29.5 days by 12 months, you get 354 days. And that means the African traditional calendar was 11 days less or short of the solar calendar. If you multiply that 11 days by 3 years, by 3, that means after every 3 years, they needed to add an additional month. And that is why for some years, the number of months were 12, and for other years, the number of months were 13. So, I mean, there was a little bit of basic arithmetic involved there. And then as part of the Cosmic Africa film, when we were making that documentary, we went to the border between Egypt and Sudan in a place called Napta in the desert. And there we were shown these rocks. You see 2 rocks there, and that is me. And you can see that I'm not a very tall person, but these are very small rocks. But the function here was for people they were used to mark time, essentially. So somebody will look at the rising sun through this window here, and there will be another window this side. And by looking at which of the rocks the sun was aligned to, they were able to know the season or the season of the year. So these are, for example, and this people used to do before the time of the Pharaoh, before the ancient Egyptian civilization. And next to the same rocks, there's another group of rocks which are aligned to different stars, and the map is shown there on the right in blue. So this circle here is for these small rock alignments, and these bigger rocks were shown to be aligned to interesting stars shown there. The sad thing is that I think these rocks have been moved from that location to somewhere else in Egypt. I hope they'll be preserved, and I don't understand why they were moved. Although you could understand, because I mean, these are too small. Somebody can just drive them over with a vehicle or so. So, and here I tried to show the principle, and I'm sure I don't have to take you through this. You all know this. I mean, so these people were really witnessing the effect of the movement of the earth around the sun, as is shown in that picture there, where the sun rises at different points along the horizon because of this movement of the earth around the sun. And then stories about constellations, like all cultures, African people were fascinated by constellations. I mean, this is the Pleiades, this is the moon, this is the Hyades cluster, there's Orion belt, Orion sword. So this is as seen from the southern hemisphere. Of course, the ancient Greeks saw it the other way around. And for us in Africa, in Southern Africa, these were the wives of this hunter who was trying to hunt the 3 zebras. And unfortunately, he was not very good while trying to shoot at the 3 zebras. He missed, and there his arrow pointing up there, and he couldn't go back to his wives because he was too afraid, too embarrassed that he didn't bring anything. And he couldn't go and get his arrow because of the lion. I think this is the lion, Beetlejuice, I think. Yeah. So that's I mean, so really the point here is that people all across the world were inspired in a similar way to by the night sky to make stories and to make all these kind of things there. And there's a story there shown graphically. I mean, this is Aldebaran the hunter, the Pleiades, the wives of the hunter, and the Orion's belt being the 3 zebras there. And then, of course, we have things that you don't see in the north. We have the Southern Cross, which for us, we saw them as giraffes, because where I come from, they never set. You can see them very low on the horizon. And when people saw them as a background through trees, they imagine giraffes eating tree leaves. That's why they call them giraffes. And then we have the 2 Magellanic Clouds. You know, there are galaxies, of course. And because where I come from, can be very dusty when it's drought. They used to see how bright, if they don't see the small one, and they see only the big one. And in this,
I think we got muted somehow. How do we fix it?
I just unmuted.
Okay, thank you.
That's what it was.
Great.
I can continue.
Maybe restart the story.
Okay, yeah. Lucia likes to remind me of this. So there was a solar eclipse in 2001 in Namibia, and we went there with the filmmakers to learn from this traditional society, the San people, what they thought the solar eclipse is. And that perception is shown by this rock engraving. Here you have a lion, you have a long tail of a lion, and the end of the tail has like a disc, it's wrapped around a disc. So according to them, an eclipse occurs when a lion wraps his tails around the sun. And living in the bush, the lion is the most evil thing to them. So here we are a couple of days before the eclipse. We start asking them questions about the eclipse. And of course, then it doesn't occur to them because they can't predict when the eclipse happens, you know. So on the day of the eclipse, they started linking the questions with what was happening. And it didn't help that I was carrying a small mid telescope. So they said I had something to do with the eclipse. They were really, really upset. You know. So fortunately, we had an anthropologist who explained, and I had to go and explain to them to bring peace between us and them. And the way I explained to them, I told them that the earth is like a big round ball, the sun is like an even bigger round ball, and an eclipse happens when this is here, this is there. And they said yes. So there was peace. A couple of days later, we were driving down with one of the elders from that village, and I asked him, so what causes an eclipse? Guess what? he gave me back what I gave, what I told him a few days back earlier. I don't know whether what we did was right, because we didn't intend to change their views about to turn against their culture, but it shows you that traditional societies are very much adaptable. They move with time, and that actually, I'm gonna get carried away now. So there's a tribe in West Africa called the Dogon people in Mali. They live on the cliffs. A French anthropologist 100 years ago visited them and wrote a book claiming that the Dogons knew or had seen a partner, what do you call it? Binary partner of the star Sirius without telescopes. I don't know how you can see it with your eyes without telescopes. And so then this French guy started coming up with stories that these people come from another stellar system, blah, 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 blah. And so I never believed that story. I mean, I'm still to be convinced. But probably what happened is that somebody went to them before this French guy and told them the story, the same way that I was explaining an eclipse to this community in Southern Africa. And they probably made it part of their understanding of the world. So I mean, people are very smart, they they learn. Yeah, okay. And then this is a very interesting picture. This is another rock art in South Africa. We have lots of rock art in Southern Africa from the same culture. The first South Africans, they went there before everyone else. And I mean, this has been clarified. That rock art there, we have made a sketch of it here. And in it, you see elands. These are elands. Elands are like big antelopes, very big, bigger than a cow. And what is that? Is that somebody witnessing an event of something from the sky falling onto an antelope? Or is it the imagination of somebody in a trance? Very interesting. So could we find records of astronomical events on the rock? Very interesting. I don't think that that question has been answered. Oops. Oh. I can't. Okay. All right. Now let's go to my favorite talk. So there is a city. In fact, if you go from West Africa, most of West African countries, from Senegal, Mali, Niger, they have a history going of writing going back a long time ago. It all started probably 1,500 years ago when trade between North Africa and West Africa started. And then the Quranic schools were established there, and people started writing and reading and recording things. And so this is how Islam became part of West Africa. And a lot of books were written there. A lot of books were traded from other parts of the Islamic world. And a lot of these books cover the subject of astronomy, mathematics, Islamic studies, all kinds of studies were done there. And these books are in huge quantities. I mean, if you go to the ancient city of Timbuktu alone, almost every second person you meet on the street owns a collection of these ancient books. And they're very, very interesting. And I'll show you why they are interesting. So I put together a team of some South African scholars, Malian scholars. We worked together to try and translate some of them to see what kind of astronomy was being studied 300, 400, 500 years ago. So that is an example of a page from one of these books. And look at these two sketches or figures there. These are, Ptolemy models of the solar system. So these people were studying these models of the solar system 400 years ago. And of course, back then, the language of literature, of the academia was Arabic. So they're all mostly written in Arabic. And here's one more reason why these books are important. In the black here is a recording of an astronomical event by one scholar from West Africa in 1583. And if you don't mind, I'll read it for you. So this is a direct translation. I wish I could say I discovered this, but I didn't. Another group of researchers did, but this is a record here. In the year 991, which translates to 1583, in God's month of Rajab, the goodly, which is August, after half the night had passed, stars flew around the sky as if fire had been kindled in the whole sky. You already have an idea of what is seeing this person. East, west, north, south. It became a mighty flame lighting up the earth, and people were extremely disturbed about that. It continued until after dawn, recorded by the humble servant Mahmoud Kati. Mahmoud Kati had an interesting history. His grandfather came from Spain, and his grandfather married a local person from West Africa. And the uncle of Mahmoud Kati became the third emperor of the Songhai Empire. The empire ended in 1591 when it was invaded by Morocco. But I mean, already they had established a really huge culture of writing and academia in that part of Africa. So the great thing is that, first of all, this is 1583. This is 11 years after Tycho's supernova, 1572. So maybe if you go and search more from these books, you might find record of that or an other supernova. So it's a treasure waiting to be explored. And that is why it was very interesting. And this was written on the margin of a book which had nothing to do with astronomy. It was just somebody, I don't know whether they were reading that book and they saw this event and they recorded it. So quite fascinating. So, I mean, who would have thought that, you know, we could be talking about these things regarding African history? There you have it, evidence of that, you know. And then also I came across a book written in the 1720 something, a book about, it was a textbook. So the first page of that book, the author, who is a local person from West Africa, tells us that he wrote that book because his students were pestering him to write a textbook for their studies at the schools that they were there. And really, it is quite impressive. I mean, it's over 100 pages long. It has lots and lots of algorithms on how to calculate different aspects of Islamic calendar. Algorithm, I mean, I remember going to Timbuktu, which is a desert, very charming, old, historical, very African city. And I was sitting there with my Mac laptop, and this person was reading to me in English the algorithm. I was writing a Fortran code based on the algorithm, and I could confirm. I know Fortran, exposing how old I am. I still love Fortran, by the way. I do Python too. So, but it was really beautiful. I could check these algorithms and they were correct. I mean, he paid attention to detail, you know. And in the same manuscript, he included discussions on the different asterisms, constellations, and things like that. So really, I mean, this is, you know, I mean, I don't think many people would have thought that these things, you could have found them in Africa, you know. So I'm gonna again read through this. The blue part is a direct translation from what was written in Arabic in those books. So the orbits that God created in the heavens are 9. 7 of them are for planets, the 8th for stars, the 9th orbit is empty. And then they start ordering the different celestial objects according to those orbits. The first orbit, I think the moon, and then there are other planets next to us, if not the moon, except okay, so I don't know. So before the moon, there are, they call them planets, but these are rocks which apparently the angels used to throw at the devil. And I think these are probably shooting stars or something. And then after that comes the moon, and then they go, I mean, in that order: Mercury, and then the different planets: Venus, the Sun, Mars, and so on. Okay. And then I think they even explain what an orbit is. The orbit is where a planet makes a round voyage. God said every one of them swims in an orbit. We are at the center. So these are geocentric models from Ptolemy through the Islamic science that found their way to West Africa. And there is another, I mean, sketches of the different orbits. The Earth is at the center. One is for the Sun, and I think the other one is for Mercury or something like that. So these books are there. They need further exploration. Unfortunately, I didn't continue because of there was civil war, I think just before 2010, which made it dangerous to go there. But it really, I used to spend like 2 months a year in the Sahara, just enjoying studying these things and absorbing the culture and all of that, going through the past history. Yeah. And then they used to have, in the book, the textbook, he describes the quadrants and how the quadrants were used to measure the latitude of the observer by pointing the quadrant at the pole star. Of course, Timbuktu is in the northern hemisphere, so they would have been able to look at the pole star. And then the longitude was measured by timing an eclipse, a lunar eclipse, from 2 different locations, and the time difference would be an indication of the longitude. That's how they would do it. And then for time during the day, they would use the gnomon, which is just the stick which you put on the ground, right up, and the shadow, depending on where the shadow is, you can have an estimate of the different times of the year, of the day, sorry, different times of the day. And then here's an example again of why these books are very important. This is a data table. It's called a ZIJ. A ZIJ is a table of parameters that were used to accurately calculate positions of planets and the moon. And I consulted with an Islamic institute in Germany, and they told me that this is one of the ZIJs that was thought didn't exist or had been lost. And so if we go and study these books in West Africa, we might find books that were thought to be lost in other parts of the Islamic world to be, maybe they've been kept alive in West Africa. So very important work. So I think maybe I've gone too fast. So this is towards the end of my presentation. And really the point is that I'm very happy that I've been part of this journey, to try and expose, to show that Africa has a history like all other continents. It's just that people have not been going out to study this history and to explore and expose and teach it to our kids. Not only in Africa, but in the rest of the world, so that we show that astronomy belongs to the whole of humanity, just like all other sciences. So that is where I like to end my presentation.
Amazing. So we can take questions, so many questions. And if people put questions online, I can, or Savik already raised her hand. So go ahead, Savik.
Okay, I could type it into the chat, but I was gonna ask actually, so obviously in some sense, historically, it's more secure to be consulting written records. And there are written records, as you showed, for some cultures. But I was struck also by the story that you told of your encounter around the eclipse. And I wonder if, there are obviously lots of cultures that are primarily oral and who highly value, and this is not, unique to Africa, of course, as well. There's other places where trying to capture some of that oral history is challenging, but as you said, he like repeated it exactly back to you, right? So that's like when you've trained your memory to remember words, often passed very, very faithfully down, through many years. So I'm curious if there's been much work on oral history, oral cultures.
Yeah. No, thank you for that question. I think you're asking a very relevant question, and that is one of the reasons why we decided to make documentaries, because we were concerned about those oral cultures where the people with the knowledge are dying. I mean, and therefore we had to preserve their knowledge in that way. And so it is very, very critical that you study those cultures. And unfortunately, really, it's a pity that more and more we're losing this knowledge. And I'm hoping that more people will try and find. I think, in fact, in South Africa, it will be very hard to find people with this kind of knowledge, especially in cities, maybe in rural areas. But even the traditions are being lost. I mean, knowledge is no longer handed down to the next generation like it used to be, because the new generation is not interested in this kind of knowledge. So it is really important that we document this information so that our kids get to know about it. Yeah, I agree. But also, I mean, even the oral culture, I mean, I showed with the rock engravings that perhaps it's possible that even a culture which is expected to be oral could have kept records of those kind of things. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for the nice talk. At the beginning, you had this really cool example of like these stone structures that you said were being used to sort of measure position in the calendar, time of day using the sun. With those types of like, I guess you call it astroarchaeological discoveries, are you like finding the structures and then trying to infer their purpose based off of like some alignment with celestial?
That's right.
Okay,
so you could even time by doing precession, you could even time when probably they were set up, because the positions of stars change over a long period of time because of precession and things like that. So you can precess back in time and even use astronomical dating method to date when these structures would have been put up there.
So in that sense, do you think that there are a lot of these structures that like exist out there that we haven't discovered because we haven't interpreted the meaning for them yet? Or?
Yes, I agree completely. And there are some even in East Africa where, I mean, scholars are debating about whether they were put there for astronomical purposes, but there are quite a number in Africa. Yeah. So, yeah.
So my question was, so in the place you visited, is there, so you talked about the evidences of astronomy, but is there our culture is interested in astrology? Because many communities advances in astronomy in the past were driven by interest in astrology and predicting the future based on the stars. So is that something that you found in cultures in Africa?
Yeah, so I think today when people talk astrology, they often associate it with the zodiac, and all of that. So if the question is about that, then I would say from the purely traditional African societies, I have not seen evidence of that. But of course, I mean, here we are not, I don't know whether it's correct to call this astronomy or astrology, because in a sense, it is not as scientific as we define astronomy to be today. But I mean, here stars were being used for practical human existence. So with the power of the knowledge of star positions, they could feed their societies. They could build empires based on the agriculture that came out of it. So if we limit astrology to that, then perhaps we can say so. But if it's defined in the modern sense of the word, or from the Eastern or Western sense of the word, then I did not see that in the cultures that we visited. Yeah.
I'd like to ask more about some of the books that you were finding and translating. And it sounded like there were sort of political issues that were blocking it. And I guess I'm curious, like, what are the biggest obstacles to bringing more of that material into, to light where more people can, share in it or study it or interpret?
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we were lucky because the project to study the books, the inspiration we got it from our second president in South Africa after Mandela. He traveled to Mali and saw these books and started looking for funds to fund South Africans to go and study and work with Malians to study these books. So politically, things were good for us. It's just that towards the end of our project, there were political instabilities in Mali itself. There was a coup and things like that, and it became just unsafe to go there. But the challenges really there are that there are too many of these books. I mean, you can have many PhDs on history of African astronomy based on studying these books and translating them. And it turned out it was not too difficult to do the translations, because, I mean, the people who did the translations for us were not experts real experts in Arabic, classical Arabic literature and things like that. But nonetheless, they were able to come up with very good translations, which we were able to positively compare, favorably compare with experts from Germany who were experts on Islamic astronomy. So we were able to get good translators for that. So the main challenge is that. The other challenge is dating the books, because usually the way the people who were making records or copies of an old ancient book or writing an original book, they'd always write at the end, the last page of the book, who they are, the date, and so on. But in many cases, we found those last pages missing. And so then the dating means that you have to find a scientific way of dating these books. So for the ones that I've presented here, I mean, we could tell the name of the author and the date, but for many other books like this, we're not able to date them and to get the authors. Yeah, but it was quite. I mean, it was nice. I felt very inspired going there. To these ancient buildings, ancient mosques. They call them universities, although they're not real universities in the modern sense of the word. But where you had the big professors there were Black African in the 1600s. I mean, I think presenting history like that to young kids, especially from Africa, from South Africa, I think it's a very powerful way of bringing kids into science to get them more interested, because we are facing a big challenge, in South Africa and in Africa, that we are not getting enough young people to take up careers in science. and by showing that, this tradition has been going on for several centuries. It didn't just start a few years back. I think it's a very powerful way of addressing that problem, really. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So you're the first president of the African Astronomical Society, and it's still in its first few years, right?
I'm the third president.
The third president.
Okay.
And I guess how have you brought any of this work into your role as that? Do you have any vision for that for society as a whole?
Oh, okay, yeah. So we just recently formed African Astronomical Society, and the reason why we did that is because we have a lot of good infrastructure in Africa. I mean, in South Africa, we are a major part of the SKA project. So majority of the dishes will be housed in South Africa. We have 10-meter class optical telescopes. We have 1-meter class, 2-meter class telescopes, even within South Africa and across other African countries. And then we have the HESS telescope in Namibia and so on. So we have lots of equipment, astronomical equipment, facilities to do the science, but we do not have enough people. I mean, Africa has a population of over 1 billion people, but has less than 300 astronomers, PhD astronomers, the entire continent. Compare that to the US. I mean, I've just been to the WAS meeting, and I think there were easily more than 1,000, I think maybe more than 2,000 people who attended it. So you see what the challenge is. And so what Lucia is saying is quite important, that these are some of the tools we can use or vehicles we can use to try and grow the community in Africa. I mean, there are parts of Africa where there's not even astronomy, no astronomy activity at all taking place, and so we're trying to reverse that. Right now, our funding is from South African government, which is nice. We're hoping to become more self-sustaining in the future, but I mean, we are going from strength to strength, and I'm hoping that we will build some relationships, hopefully by the time I go back next week with some of you. So that is great. And I agree, this kind of information will be a central part of we have different subcommittees of the executive committee. The outreach committee will use this kind of knowledge and information when we're doing our outreach, yes.